the more religious you are, the better sex that you have.
They have more of it and they like it more. That's precisely the definition of better sex.
So when we talk about more sex, what are we talking, like, per week? Are we talking?
Let's put some numbers down.
Can we just
Is my wife listening to this? Let's talk numbers.
For this and more, visit the website.
No, come on, Doug. Numbers, baby. You're a statistician.
There's a good chance that in 100, 200 years, we're going to be living in a country that is a large percentage Amish. They actually found that assigning people to have more sex when they didn't want to have more sex actually made them less happy.
Of
right?
course it did.
So this is not a chicken and the egg. This is a cock and the egg sort of thing.
Dude, there's 13-year-olds that are going to be watching this that are just going to be laughing their heads off.
James, don't watch this.
You know,
one,
like Nathan feels me.
Wait,
See,
we're like, oh, there it goes.
feel you? I get you.
There's one group of really weird people who resist that, no matter how educated and no matter how wealthy they get. Their fertility rate still just seems to stay up, and that's the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints.
The only one that agrees with me is the blood-sucking editor in Hollywood.
Wait, I'm a blood-sucking editor?
All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I am your host, Cardinellis. Today I'm joined in the studio by Brad Whitbeck, Jonah Barnes, as well as by Austin Fife, and my friend Nathan Miles, who, how do we introduce you? You're just a Hollywood editor, bro, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you're obviously not a Hollywood sound recorder because your mouth isn't close enough to your mic. So.
Well, if you'd like
There
me
we
to
go.
speak up, I can get closer. Although I'm very intimidated by this topic.
Yeah. What topic? You mean
The topic
religious
here.
sex is the best sex? You don't want that to be your first baptism by fire in the Ward Radio wigwam?
There is no way that that's
Yeah,
the
no
title
other
of this episode.
So give a peace sign to your wife right now and say, hopefully.
honey. Hi, sweetie pie.
You know. All right. So we also have visiting via Zoom statistician Stephen Craney here, who's going to shed some light.
Is it Craney or Cranny?
Cranny.
Okay.
Oh, gosh. Wait, so you've let me mispronounce your name for 2 podcasts in the past now?
It's mispronounced so often, I just don't even hear it anymore.
Ah, man. Okay, so it's Stephen Craney here who's going to shed some light on how to make your sex life better. No, I'm just kidding.
Ready, go.
No, so religious sex is the best sex. Or as soon as you get married, is it all downhill and, quote, game over? Tell us how it really goes.
Sorry,
man.
I just need to make a little caveat here. That title's a little deceptive. It's not religious sex is the best sex. It's sex among religious couples, I think is perhaps a better way to put it.
Theologically
it's
codified ritual intercourse.
It's-
is
Oh
the
my
best
God.
sex. Best.
When you say religious sex,
What is
like,
this
it's not-
episode?
Not that.
Wait, did you say sex or sex?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Let's- Say, let's get sexy.
Mop up this mess, Stephen, and sprinkle a little bit of credibility salt on this.
I know the
okay.
title. Let's talk about sects.
Oh.
That was a good
Baby.
one. That was a good one.
Right.
Okay, so is sex within the confines of religiously accepted marriage better or worse than secular orgies? I don't know. Tell us what's going on, dog.
So, yeah, there's a couple different parts to that. First is, do married people...
Yes, generally that's how it goes.
do married people have more fulfilling sex lives than non-married people? And that is true. So there's this idea out there that sex is what single people do, because most movies when they show sex scenes, they're always with single people, right? But the vast majority of sex happens within the confines of some kind of a paired relationship, even if not a marital relationship. And those types of sexual encounters actually do tend to be more sexually satisfying. And so there's that, right? Married people, they have more sex. They report more satisfaction with their sex lives. So yes, you could say they have better sex, I guess. And then
yes.
do religious people?
That's exactly what that. That's exactly what that is. They have more of it and they like it more. That's precisely the definition of better sex, is what that is.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, they have better sex, right? And then there's the question of, do religious people, right? And again, there are these kind of stereotypes out there that religious people have been sexually repressed, and so they find it, harder to just let go and enjoy the act.
Missionary only.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it's so I actually did one of the earlier studies on this, looking at, okay, just how religious are you and how good is your sex life? Self-report, right?
Let's hope it was self-report, bro. That could get real awkward real fast, man.
Well, the funny thing
I was gonna ask how was this determined, right?
it's just a Likert scale, or not a Likert scale, but just rate your sex life on a scale from 1 to 10. Obviously it's more sophisticated than that, but it's a question like that, right? And it's surprising to me because I've tried to get, because I do some sexuality research, I've tried to get sex related questions on so many surveys before, and everybody runs away from it.
Really?
But I was finally able to convince the guys at the Baylor survey of religion, and I think their third or fourth wave, to include a sexual satisfaction question. So they included it. I was able to run the numbers, and it does look like that your religiosity is associated with having a more satisfying sex life.
What's even interesting is it's not just a binary, like, are you religious, are you not religious? And this is me quoting from you, Stephen. Religious couples, as measured by reading scriptures together, praying, and attending worship service jointly, tend to have better relationship outcomes, including improved intimacy. So it's not just a binary, are you religious? There seems to be some connection with the more religious you are, the better sex that you have, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're quoting, that wasn't my study, but I quoted, I think that was some BYU folks.
Well, in the Light and Truth letter, it said Stephen Craney, so it's fact now.
Okay, all right. Well, I did not include joint scripture study. Mine was just a very simple kind of like, how religious are you? How important is religion in your daily life? That kind of a thing. I do think that some of the folks over at BYU in the family department and the religion department, they've done a lot more fine-grained stuff on, do you pray together, things like that. I don't want to put words in the mouth, but it's things like that, and that is associated with, and they've actually found what they call the mediating mechanism, which is, how does it affect your sex life? So for a lot of it, it leads to having a better relationship overall, right? If you're arguing with your spouse all the time, you're not going to have a great sex life, right? If you feel very close and comfortable with your spouse, then you kind of, have a better sex life, right? So,
well, what about makeup sex, bro? Because sometimes just starting a fight for makeup sex, come on,
just
you
picking
can't
it
say
Wait,
that might work for some people, I guess, but you don't see that in the data.
Wait, you mean specifically picking a fight to manipulate? Never mind. Like, I'm not pursuing that any further.
I'm not a therapist, man. I'm a statistician. Okay, I don't know.
That does not sound healthy.
Generally speaking, the worse it's a very strong relationship. The worse your relationship, the worse your sex life. It's
okay.
So this is
the whole. You get into a fight and you throw things around or whatever, and then it just ends in this passionate lovemaking session. That's not.
Works in
again,
movies.
that might happen for individuals. You don't really see it in the data.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, man. So what do you see in the data? And I have so many questions. So many questions. All right.
And a couple you can ask.
And a couple that you can ask, right? No, actually, I was thinking, who has the worst sex, though, self-reported? That would be, really funny. You know what I'm saying? Just seeing what people are like, oh, this sucks. This is horrible, right?
Mormon Story subscribers.
Oh, Austin, shots fired.
But it's so true.
Is
Not
there?
necessarily.
No, I don't know. You're the statistician. You tell us, Stephen.
Well, so...
He's praying right
sorry,
now.
real fast. What was the question? I was writing things down.
Who has the worst sex?
Oh, who has the worst sex? So, basically, people who are miserable. There's kind of there's this. So, sex and happiness tend to go together. So, for a long time, people thought, oh, have sex because that will make you happier, right? Because happy people are having lots of sex. But you don't know the direction of causality until you do experiments. So, they actually did an experiment where they had a bunch of couples sign up and they randomly assigned them differing levels of sex to have. And they actually found that assigning people to have more sex when they didn't want to have more sex actually made them less happy.
Of
right?
course it did.
So this is not a chicken and the egg. This is a cock and the egg sort of thing.
Oh my gosh, Austin! Whoa.
I love it. Austin gets a 10 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
That was.
But what they found basically is that if you're happy, you have more sex. It's not that having sex will make you happier, right? So if you're happier, you have more sex. If it's a close relationship. That's the other thing I found too. So religious people, they do report better sex. They also report more sex. They're more sexually active. And that's interesting too, because nowadays there's just not a lot of sex happening. We're sort of in a sex famine. There's actually an Atlantic article that quoted me on this.
Oh, cool.
So schools that we normally think of as being, I was talking to somebody the other day about this, like schools that we normally think of, we think of colleges as being this sort of bastion of sexual activity. But when they actually do surveys of college students, hardly any of them are having sexual relations. Really? And so I actually would not be surprised if BYU was actually relatively high on that scale, right? Because they've got more married students.
Sure.
There's probably more sex happening in those contexts that, at like church-run schools. I wouldn't be surprised than at kind of normal state schools.
That's not widely known. That's not. I
have zero data on this. This is me just conjecturing.
That's not what I heard.
If married people are having more sex, and hardly anybody's married on these college campuses, except if you're at a religious institution, it might just be a bigger part of their lives, right? Again, the whole, fraternity and sorority people do tend to have more sex, but still, if you look at kind of the average college student, there's just not a lot of that going on anymore. I mean, it was more like in the 90s. There's some speculation about why that is. I tend to think pornography has something to do with it, but it's hard to nail that down causally. But anyway.
So on this issue in the Light and Truth letter, it comes up in a couple different places. So like women in the church, women are doing really well. I quote and cite Matthew Saxey and Hal Boyd. I'm just pulling up my quotes here. Women in highly religious so this is women specifically. Women in highly religious relationships were twice as likely as their secular peers to say they were satisfied with their sexual relationships.
Twice as likely.
And then in the Wheatley analysis, united religious couples reported higher emotional closeness, commitment, partner virtues. None of that's like terribly surprising, but what is interesting is in my delayed gratification section, I cite Nicholas Wolfinger of the University of Utah, and there's two statements he said I think are fascinating. Americans reporting one lifetime sex partner have the happiest marriages. And then the difference between having one or more than one lifetime sex partner is the most consequential in predicting marital quality.
Whoa, wait, say that last one.
A note about Nicholas Wolfinger. I've never met I've seen him briefly.
Yeah.
A really interesting guy. He met his first wife at a strip club.
My man.
He's not.
Man.
I don't get a super religious vibe from the man, but he loves to sort of like be the contrarian about this. So he actually does a lot of this stuff showing, look, these religious marriages are great, and these people you get married is great.
But I met my wife at the strip club.
Personally, I get the vibe that he enjoys being the contrarian and pissing certain people off. Just a
double. My man. My man.
Any reason to believe his research is unreliable, or he just
no
it's
solid research.
So Jonah was asking, so the difference between having one and more than one lifetime sex partner is the most consequential in predicting marital quality.
By how much?
Wow.
I'm sure I could dig into the research
most-
more.
Okay.
This was in my delayed gratification section to just outline that we as members of the church have lots of opportunities to strengthen our delayed gratification muscle. And
is that two now? That's two, right?
Oh, jeez.
I'm keeping track. That's two.
Oh, come on. Dude, there's 13-year-olds are going to be watching this that are just going to be laughing their heads off.
James, don't watch this
Nathan feels me.
100%.
Nathan feels me.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait, we're like, oh, there it goes.
Feel you? I get you.
I feel like the lawyer in Jurassic Park, when the lawyer in Jurassic Park shows up, you know what I'm saying? And there's the scientist, it's like, don't mess with time and history. Then there's the geneticist, it's like, how dare you mess with science? And the lawyer's like, dude, we could charge season passes. And the guy that owns Jurassic Park is like, the only one that agrees with me is the blood-sucking lawyer. You know, it's like, the only one that agrees with me is the blood-sucking editor in Hollywood.
Wait, I'm a blood-sucking editor?
Just kidding.
He's like, yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah, you are expensive. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
So
I am
yeah.
very expensive.
So all right. So Stephen Craney, dude, tell us more, man.
I mean, well, that's pretty much it. I mean, there again, it's hard to get funding to do these sorts of studies because everybody's skittish about sex. Occasionally, you can include. I mean, there is some evidence that some people have found some evidence that for women in very conservative settings, there might actually be a negative effect with different degrees. So, like sexual openness, things like that. So again, it's not all roses, but it's a lot of roses. So
and something that you said earlier, Stephen, I feel like this is really good data to help refute that idea that I had thrown at me in high school, where people are saying, "Oh, you're in a sexually repressive religion," and I'm like,
Right.
"What gives you that idea? Like, how am I simultaneously in a sex cult?" But a sexually repressive religion. That doesn't make sense to me. And so I think this is really cool data that you're bringing up that's showing, hey, when you get down to it, the increased religiosity leads to a better intimacy, and it's about that better connection between each other. I think that's a fascinating thing to bring up.
Yeah, because back in the day, early stage sexual revolution, everybody thought that if you just released your inhibitions and everybody just had orgies or whatever, that would lead to peak, sexual experiences. But then people are just, I think they're starting to realize more and more that it's like, no, it's committed couples. They report better kind of long-term satisfaction, and they score higher on all these different measures because again, they're safe, right? It's not the sexual the whatever benefits you might get from sexual variety or whatever, it doesn't, from sleeping around, doesn't outweigh the security of a long-term relationship and how that helps sexual functioning because you feel safe.
It's almost like the church has been true since the beginning. It's almost like they were right all along. Well, it's like we've been saying this for 10,000 years, and yet every generation's like, but maybe they're not right. And then
that's a very good point. Like, again, back during the sexual revolution, you saw a lot of the same, not a lot of this, a lot of these voices saying, well, this is a new thing. The church isn't with the times. But now they're not talking about that anymore, because every time people say that the church isn't with the times, it's like, well, let's wait 20 years and see if this is just a fad. And I think people are realizing that kind of, again, early stage sexual revolution was just a fad, right? We don't have, pornographic movies being shown in mainstream theaters to our 8-year-olds, right? That's kind of what a lot of the early, like, Professor Kinsey people used to think, right? I mean, there were a lot of people that signed an early letter talking about how age of consent laws should be done away with. There were a lot of intellectuals that were signing on to that stuff in the 60s or 70s, right?
Yep.
But now we've kind of forgotten about those things. And I'm sure back then they were saying that it was the direction of history and all that other baloney. So we tend to think of the things that history has confirmed, but we tend to forget all the supposedly avant-garde movements that have sort of fallen by the wayside, especially in regards to sex. And so, yes, the church was right.
Okay, so I got
and you can prove it mathematically. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. I just have a couple of questions before we go, because I know you got a heart out here pretty soon. Is there any data positively? Because so for example, Sean McCraney says that Mormonism is a, what would you call it, Jonah? A
sci-fi pagan sex cult.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, he was not saying that to advertise how awesome our religion is, which I immediately took that as thanks. But actually, that he was meaning that's negative. He says that's bad.
Okay, so now, is there any? Okay, so I'm concerned about our fertility and our birth rate. Like Douglas Murray in the Strange Death of Europe, and also basically the West, has cataloged that basically there's not a single Western European country that has a replacement birth rate right now. I know LA County I don't think does, but like I don't think any state in America really does, outside of like Amish enclaves in the East, and Utah has a replacement birth rate, right? So
Utah does not.
Not anymore. The last graph I saw said they were above 2.3. Is that no longer the case?
For Utah?
Yeah. The Utah's the only state of the union that has a replacement birth rate right now.
I think I might. I mean, the one I saw said it was below 2.1 at this point. So I don't know. You get slightly different numbers.
Well,
depending
it's
on your-
not at 3 or 4. They ain't flying
Yeah,
500
We're
feet
not-
above the trees,
Right.
right? Okay, so I am concerned about our birth rate as a civilization, as a society. No idea is good unless it can self-replicate, all right? No theory, no religion, no society, no form of ethics is good unless it is self-perpetuating, right? And as humans, to self-perpetuate, we need procreation. So in all of your studies and with all of your statistical inquiry, has there been anything significant and noteworthy that, raised your eyebrows as to like what actually helps fertility and increase the birth rate? Was there any data about positive impact upon fertility and sex?
So, well, about fertility and sex,
Like read your scriptures more and you have more orgasms
yeah,
or something?
Well, basically,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, long story, but basically, when I was in graduate school, kind of my Walter Mitty fantasy was that I was going to be the person that talked to heads of state, to the technocrat that tried to figure out how to increase fertility rates, right? Um, Now, one reason why that didn't quite pan out is there's just nothing that does increase fertility rates. Like, no, the government has no policies, no policy triggers that can increase fertility rates by more than a little bit. Like, if you throw gobs of money at it, you might get it from like it might increase it by 0.1 or 0.2 kind of a thing. Religion's the main thing, right? Like, and that's kind of something that I bring up often in discussions is wherever you fall on the liberal conservative continuum, your idea of a functioning society has to be at least conservative and traditional enough that you have above replacement fertility. And hardly any developed countries do anymore. And the ones that do, like Israel, have these groups, these highly fertile subgroups within their communities. So like in Israel, it's the Haredi Jewish community. You bring up the Amish, they have a doubling time of 20 years. So I actually did a blog post on this recently. So you run those numbers forward, and there's a good chance that in 100, 200 years, we're going to be living in a country that is a large percentage Amish. Same thing with the Haredi Jewish community. I think they have similar doubling times as well. So I think the future actually does kind of belong to religious people, because the other ones just don't. I mean, it's just kind of a non-starter. I think South Korea right now is like 0.9 or something like that for the TFR, which is just demographic suicide. We're talking zombie apocalypse here, just empty buildings everywhere, right?
So I will say, remember, we can't use Utah as a proxy because half of Utah is not members of the Church of Jesus Christ. So we're talking about the Church of Jesus Christ. Using Utah as a proxy is a terrible idea. And yet, despite half of Utah not being members of the Church of Jesus Christ, it is the 6th highest fertility rate of the United States.
Sorry, go ahead.
But the religion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints there's 3 types of fertility or of sterilization: pill book sterilization, pocketbook sterilization, and textbook sterilization. You use contraception a lot, and that lowers your birth rate. You get educated. When people get educated, they tend to have fewer babies, and when you get rich, you tend to have fewer babies, and those bears out all over the place. But there's one group of really weird people who resist that. No matter how educated and no matter how wealthy they get, their fertility rate still just seems to stay up, and that's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, it still drops, but not nearly as fast. We have this kind of resistance built into our theology that lets us stay fertile despite, like when those Amish, I know we're all impressed with the Amish birth rate because it's cray-cray, but when those Amish leave, get educated, and get rich, it plummets. Same thing with Muslims when they move to the Western world. It plummets. But Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, no matter where you put us, in the richest, wealthiest countries in the world, we still tend to have this weird force that pushes our birth rate up. At least that's what I've seen. I'm no statistician, but
yeah, I mean, we don't have the 7 kids family anymore. So it's not like we've been unaffected.
Well, I mean,
hey,
you do.
You're one to talk.
Yes, I am an outlier. But so I actually ran the numbers for another Deseret News article to look at our fertility rate, right? Because a lot of people use Utah as a proxy, but only half of us, and the half that aren't Mormon tend to be like single people living in the avenues,
right?
I was going to say with their pets, but I won't, stereotype there. But yeah, single people living in the avenues that have 0 kids, right? Although I guess I don't know the distribution of parity, but anyway, But so I actually looked at self-identified Latter-day Saints and how many children they reported. So I actually derived a TFR from that. And we do, and it's greater than average. I think I found it was basically, I'd have to look, but it's a little bit over 3, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
again, more than we're still replacing ourselves. It's more than most people are having, right? But it's not like the old school Utah pioneer days, when we were having 7 to 9 kids a family, when we were doubling as quick as the Amish or the Haredi Jewish community.
Let's
So
turn it
those days are
around.
over. But in order to do that, in order to have a 7 kid, a TFR of 7, an average family size of 7, at this point, you kind of have to just separate yourself from the world, like the Amish and the Haredi have done. Um, Whereas we're kind of special because we still, like you said, we still have that higher fertility rate, but we live in the world.
Yeah, being
Right?
like,
Age with world. We don't have our own little communities like these other groups
it's
do.
almost like we're being in the world but not of the world.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
We need
I
hats that
like
say
how you put that.
Yeah.
hats that say MENA, MENA, make 8 normal again. Make 8 children normal again.
Mechna, like
Mechna.
Thekna.
Yeah, make
But
8
Mechna.
children normal again. That's what we're gonna do.
Okay, awesome. Any other golden nuggets of wisdom? Any recommendations? If you were the technocrat that was giving advice to Russell M. Nelson, I got to tell you, I've said this for 15 years now, as long as I've been a podcaster and a radio host. I support Russell M. Nelson. I believe we have modern prophets and everything, but I will tell you right now, they're not all the same. Omni, not the same as Nephi. All right? Omni, not the same as Alma. All right?
True.
Scarred it.
True.
Where are you going
it's
with
true.
this?
Brad, you know it.
You know exactly what I'm talking about here. I will know that we have a Nephi level, like a third Nephi level prophet back who is just based, and straight up talks to God every Wednesday after correlation meeting, all right? When he comes in and just does a conference talk that starts out saying, in the name of God, I command you to go have more children. That's when I know. Based prophets are back on earth, baby. So, if you were the technocrat that was advising Russell M. Nelson or who's the Democrat donor again? Uchtdorf.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, because he's statistically the next one, or Bednar, okay? If you were the technocrat that was the Elon Musk to their Trump, all right, would you tell him you need to do a conference talk saying, in the name of God, I command you to have children? Or what would you recommend as that technocrat who could whisper in his ear, what's that one thing you would get across?
So I'll have to admit, people lobbying the general authorities is kind of a pet peeve of mine because everybody has their little list, and so
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you,
Well,
Steve.
We agree.
But as a general cultural point, I do think it is interesting that we've gotten to the point where it's so sensitive that we can't point out to larger families as some kind of an archetypal ideal, right? And yes, some people cannot, they are infertile, they suffer with those things, but in no other field do we use that as an excuse to not recognize the goodness of something, right? Education is good, even though not everybody can get an education, but that doesn't prevent us from recognizing from kind of honoring the person that has the PhD or the JD or whatever, right?
Great point.
By the same token, if we're going to honor something, I think honor the woman who has born 12 children or whatever, right? And I think we can do that without making other people feel bad. Because again, we don't do that for anything else except for family size, where we say, okay, we're just going to pretend like this isn't really something to be proud of or something to put on a pedestal because it's going to make other people feel bad. When we do that, again, we do this with education, with secular accomplishments all the time. And so I think we should be open about doing it with family size. And I think if we change those norms, then I think there will be, because yes, there are some people who are infertile or whatever, but I also know people who have one child, and I know their personal situation, and they could very easily have 2, but there's just no, I don't think we've done a very good job of a culture of kind of platforming that and talking about all the beautiful. We have a very pro-natalist theology.
Yeah.
I mean, again, DNC 132, like it's super. I mean, that is the defining characteristic of godhood, is that you are having children for all eternity, right? Super pro-natalist, and I feel like we could live that out better as a people.
Okay. Any other questions for him before we go? Because I got to tell you, I feel like the weakest link. I'm looking at Brad here, pumping him out like crazy. He's already at 3 with like another 7 on the docket.
Oh my gosh! Don't tell Riley that.
True.
Yeah, and Jonah's got like 7. You got 8 kids, right, bro? 8 kids?
Yeah.
Dog, you're a champion.
And that's only halfway.
Yeah, dude.
He's only
and
halfway.
then freaking Nathan here. How many you scoring, bro? You got
4.
5. 4.
4.
So far.
I kind of want to bring this full circle, kind of back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So when we talk about more sex, what are we talking like per week? Are we talking?
Let's put some numbers down.
Can we just
Is my wife listening to this? Let's talk numbers here.
For this and more, visit the website.
No, come on, dog. Numbers, baby. You're a statistician.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. I do remember one colleague of mine talked about how he had like a poster presentation on frequency or whatever, and people would at a conference, and people would come up to the poster, and it was this graph, and they'd kind of point to a certain number, and they'd follow the curve to see where the point was, and then they just like walk off, either smiling or shrugging or something like that, to see where they fell relative to everybody else, right?
Uh-huh.
So usually when people know the numbers, it's kind of I think average is something like a couple times a week sort of a thing, with long tails though, right? Which means there's some people that don't have that, it's like a couple times a month. There are some people where it's once a day or multiple times a day. A lot of variation in the human sexual experience, even among married couples.
So now we've talked about the number of views, and I can understand this as a YouTuber. What about the average view duration? Do you have any comments?
Oh my gosh!
Zero data on that. If you can convince anybody to put that into a survey, then yeah, you're gonna have a lot of
Quantity, not quality, perhaps.
Oh my gosh!
That is funny. Okay, so any other questions here for Stephen Cranny? Because we established that earlier, right? Stephen Cranny. Called him Cranny all day, man.
Oh.
That's embarrassing. So Stephen Cranny, any other questions for Stephen Cranny here before we go?
Trying to think.
How many more are you having?
That's up to my wife and God and nature.
It's a
So we'll
great
see.
answer.
Wow.
Yeah, so like I said, we're both kind of pushing 40. So at some point, nature kicks in.
You're pushing 40 kids? That's an impression. That's an
All right.
impressive goal.
You might-
that is
you might wanna
ambitious,
slow
bro.
down.
You're pushing for 40. Wow. Okay.
Like there's that old joke that Mormon women stop having kids at 22 because 23 is too many even for them. But,
Hey,
Hey, good.
funny,
Hey,
dude.
good for you though, dude. 8 kids, good for you, man.
Yeah.
That's
All
awesome.
right, man. So religious sex is the best sex. Religious couples are the hottest couple. Mormon chicks are the hottest chicks. Mormon guys are the hottest guys. What can I say here?
And
Yeah.
Stephen Cranny proved it mathematically.
Stephen Cranny proved it mathematically. You got to get baptized if you want better sex. That's just science.
Oh my
at
God.
this point. All right. That's just science.
Hey, don't fight the science.
Yeah, don't fight the science. Exactly. In this religion, we follow the science, and the science says Mormon sex is the best sex. So, yeah, for this and more.
Oh my god.
Actually, I don't know how we would give more on our website. For a list of other websites, go to
Oh my gosh.
wardradio.com. I am so getting excommunicated for this.